season starts here, the Vancouver Boat Show.
All right, welcome to the VIBS. Thank you all for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here. So if you experience any technical difficulties during this session, please contact me, your moderator, in the chat window, and I'll help you as much as I can. While the presentation is going, if you think of any questions, you don't need to try to remember them to the end. You can just type them into the Q&A box or Q&A window in Zoom, and we will read out your questions at the end of the presentation. So that gets us into a good spot to get started. So it's our pleasure to present to you Aubrey Millard and Living the Dream, Desolation Sound and the Broughton Islands.
Hello, this is Aubrey Millard, and what you have on your screen is our boat card. Judy and I have been living on our boat in Ontario 32. That's why we have the trillium symbol up here. We used to belong to the Toronto Hydroplane and Sail Club, but now we have since moved and we're living up here in glorious Elliott Lake, Ontario, and we belong now to the North Channel Yacht Club. Our boat is Valeta 4. 1978 Ontario 32. If you wish to have any questions that aren't answered on this presentation, do not hesitate to email me at svvvaletaiv@hotmail.com. The website here is actually for the sale of our boat. Unfortunately, we are looking at the possibility of selling the boat down in Mexico rather than shipping it all the way up here to Lake Huron. If we sell it, fine. If we don't sell it, we'll bring it up here and enjoy sailing Lake Huron. This is where we have traveled throughout North America. We actually started from Toronto back in 1998, went up the Great Lakes and down, and then over to Europe for several years. We've also, when we returned, we came back to Great Lakes and we went out to St. Lawrence and Newfoundland, and then right down to Central America, actually down farther. When we wanted to go to the West Coast, we went up to Corpus Christi, Texas, and shipped it across to Bellingham, Washington. And we spent 4 or 5 years here on the West Coast. And we've enjoyed that very much. Now we're looking at our boat. This is her under her spinnaker. We don't use the spinnaker pole because it's a bit too complicated. It's just Judy and I are sailing it. A couple of other things to notice with our boat is that we have a dinghy tow system. And this is the way we've been towing our dinghy for 20 years. The only time we've ever taken it off is when we crossed the Atlantic. So we've had it on the entire length of the North America coast, both east and west. And here is our boat at a nice misty morning. Another interesting thing, we do have mast steps. And at the top, we have a Davis metal radar reflector. And we've got a bimini with a full enclosure. We've replaced our wind generator, and we now have solar panels on top of our bimini. Here's the layout of our boat. It's 32 feet length overall. The thing we like about it is that 45% of the weight of the boat is lead in the keel, and it makes for a very good stiff boat. We keep the V-berth set up as our bedroom area, and there's a nice small heads with sink and hot and cold pressurized running water. Our main salon has a nice table here, and the salon settee pulls out for a small double berth there if we have anybody extra. Our little galley is well equipped with a 3-burner propane stove with oven, refrigerator, and a galley sink with hot and cold pressurized running water. We also have an overboard water facility as well. So this is our galley. It's quite convenient and handy. Judy and I enjoy cooking, so you can see that we have a fair number of spice racks there. Our refrigerator here has a bit of a cold box freezer, so we can freeze meats and things of that nature. And our main salon, here we have a oil Dickinson heater, which has proved quite helpful. My wife likes the southern climate, and she doesn't know how I ever got her to go up to the west coast, where it's a lot cooler than it is down in the Caribbean. However, and this is our table. The leaf drops down for a small double berth here, or it comes up on the other side, so we can accommodate 6 or 8 people around our table for meals. This is the other side. The cushions we have are cushion covers, and inside we stuff bedding and towels and soft fabrics like that. It's a nice way of being able to have some extra storage. Now this is where we're going today. We're starting out from Vancouver, and we're coming up and going first of all into the Jarvis Inlet. And in the Jarvis Inlet, right up near the top, there's the Princess Louisa Inlet. It's fascinating scenery. And then from there, we will go out to Middle Knock Island, just outside of Cortez. And then we're going to spend some time here in the Desolation Sound. And then we're going right up here into the Broughton Islands. So here's the chart going into the Jarvis Inlet. A couple of things I'd like to point out to you is that around the area here, there are several good anchorages. We enjoy Pender Harbor. There's another place here called Smuggler's Cove. So that's some very good anchoring down in this part of the world. We went up through here and right up. This length of this is 45 miles from here up to here. The thing is that along the reaches here, there are no anchoring spots. There are only a couple of anchoring spots here, down here, and then up here in Princess Louisa Inlet. A couple of other points I would make, if any of you are looking at going up and doing the fjords on the BC coast, you've got to be concerned about when they talk about rapids. For example, the Seashell Inlet here does not go down and open into the open water. The only way that the water gets in and out of the Seashell Inlet is to come up through here. So just imagine the volume of water from these inlets going through this very narrow gap 4 times a day, going in and out and in and out. And so you've got to calculate your time of going towards these rapids to arrive at slack water so that you can get through without being swamped by the heavy currents that are there. Now this is the entrance to Princess Louisa Inlet. We have here the Malibu Rapids, and then the inlet goes 3 miles up inside here. This is a private resort and youth camp at the entrance. So here we are going up to the inlet, and it's beautiful. I love the majestic mountains. I love the waterfalls. I love the sea life, and it's a great, tremendous life. That's why I call these series that I have called Living the Dream, because we were able to spend years playing around the west coast of BC before going down towards Central America. This is looking back down out the inlet. This is the camp down here, and this is the Malibu Rapids down there. But you can see the mountains in the background. Lovely scenery, like this. And above these mountains, there are many of them that are, of course, glacier topped as well. About the end of Princess Louisa Inlet is Chatterbox Falls. And this is a very heavy cascade coming down. You can see how there are smaller streams that are coming down into the valley before it empties out into the inlet. This is a very popular spot, so there are always several boats around. And this is getting up closer, looking at it. There's the provincial park around here, very good trails, well marked. But they also caution you because there's a lot of mist created by the falls here. So you can see the mist. I'm right beside the falls looking out over the inlet. And the reason for that is this. They say don't go near the fall because the surrounding rocks are moss covered and slippery. 12 people have lost their lives when I was reading this warning. Now, this was also back in about 2015, so that we don't know whether there's been more since then or not. But the trees there are all moss covered because it's like a temperate rainforest situation. So there's a lot of humidity and a lot of moss. Then along the sides of the inlet are all kinds of waterfalls. I find myself enjoying looking at waterfalls. We took the dinghy, of course, we dinghied around and took shots of these. And here we are getting ready to go out now. And we're going now up to a place called Middle Knock Island. This is just south of Cortez Island. And this is the whole area here of Desolation Sound. So Middle Knock Island is out in the middle of everything. And it's a small rookery for seagulls. And there is an anchorage in it. And again, very small and restricted. Unfortunately, we were the only boat there. And when anchoring in this kind of a small bay, you've got to be very careful so that you don't swing into the shallows at low tides. But this is it's a nature park. There's no power there. There is a small cabin and a shelter, and a volunteer is there during the summer hours to help people learn a little bit about the vegetation and the rookery on the island. And so here is the overlooking one of the rookeries there. And vegetation is quite abundant. So we left Middle Knock and then we went up and into the Desolation Sound proper. But we went down this area here around Guilford Island to stop in at Grace Harbor and Susan Mills. Now, all throughout here, these are fairly heavy currents in here, so you've got to watch. But there are some nice anchorages up here and also up in this area. So here we are going into, this is the entrance to the Desolation Sound. I love these mountains that are all in the background. We find areas like this where there is evidence of lumbering. Initially, I was put off. Again, several years ago, I was put off by it, saying, "Oh, isn't this a horrible way of destroying the area?" But this area will revegetate itself. Like, for example, this area over here was probably logged 3 or 4 years ago. 5 or 10 years from now, it's going to be like this. So it is a recoverable area, and our logging industry is an essential industry. Well, here's the Leda down in Grace Bay in that area at anchor. We love anchoring by ourselves. We like the isolation as you go from. And wandering around the park that is there, there are nice trails going up this waterfall. However, it also shows the history of the area in that there's several areas where there are abandoned lumber and vehicles. But there's still active lumbering going on here. And so here is one of the areas where they are launching all of this lumber. It's bound up by heavy wire cables, and they tip it off the truck, and it's side launched down into the water. Now you have these small boats. I'm not sure whether they call them Mustang boats or not, but they bounce and shepherd the log booms into different areas. There is a small outdrive propeller centered in this with a very strong cage around it so that it doesn't get trapped by logs and that. And it can rotate 360 degrees. So these are very mobile ways of shepherding the logs into position for whatever purpose they're going to be using. So here's one of them that's right in the middle of the logs. He tipped at a cockeyed angle, but he's chauffeuring these logs into a particular log boom. And the logs have markings on the ends to indicate what kind of lumber it involves. We passed this spot too. It's a shellfish farm. And unfortunately, at that point in time, the farm had been closed for a year and was probably not going to be open for another year or two. because there was a paralytic shellfish infestation they suspect was probably attributable to the red algae. And it takes up to a year from the infestation of the algae for the paralytic toxins to be eliminated. So this unfortunate shellfish farm hasn't been used for a couple of years. Now we went back out, and before we went up into the Desolation Sound proper, we went over here to Squirrel Cove on the back end of Cortez Island. And we went there to resupply because there are no supplies in the area. There are no marinas inside the Desolation Sound. There are many parks, but no marinas. So here we were able to resupply with groceries and frozen food, liquor. We were able to get showers, and they have a hotel service as well. And we just spent the night there, and then we went around here to Roscoe Bay. And Roscoe Bay was a very lovely anchorage that we enjoyed. We had an opportunity to go ashore. So here's a picture of us in this bay all by ourselves, only one other boat. In fact, that boat left the next night, so we had the whole bay to ourselves. And this is the view that we have looking outside the bay. And this is the kind of trail that they have. There's a lake inside there that called Black Lake. And this is a picture. It's freshwater lake. And so it's nice and refreshing after having been in salt water for a time to be able to have a bath and a swim in fresh water. Well, the interesting things we saw were these foxglove flowers. They were abundant all over the place. And the vegetation very rich and lush. Now this is the main area of Desolation Sound. And many of these islands are negotiable by a dinghy. You can anchor one spot and then you can dinghy around to many of these different areas. And anybody doing these kind of trips, I would suggest have yourself a good dinghy with a half decent size engine so that you can go good distances and not have to be worried about heavy weather. So this is the entrance to one of the islands on it. Here's Valeda at anchor in one of her days. And then we just dinghied around and started to enjoy all the spectacular scenery of Desolation Sound. Something that we had to do, and I would suggest if you're doing this with dinghy, have yourself a small mobile GPS because it could be easy to get lost in the myriad of islands that are there. So this is some of the beautiful countryside that they have in that Desolation Sound. Unfortunately, fish farms. And there are many fish farms, not only in Desolation Sound, but all over the BC coast and the Vancouver Island west coast. I am very critical of these fish farms because they do pollute the areas and it's affecting the spawning and the salmon runs. The First Nations are very strongly opposed to fish farms. And let's say there are hundreds of them. The other frustrating things is that the fish farms will often set up in some of the lovely little bays that would be great anchorages, but the fish farm is there and takes up the room. And the vegetation there, again, it's like a temperate rainforest. So there are all kinds of trails and many parks that are there. The interesting thing you see are some of these stumps that have these little slits in them. And I'll be able to talk about those slits in a minute or so. But many of these stumps have trees growing out of them. This is one of the purposes of leaving such a large stump. So this is probably original old growth there. Then from the Desolation Sound area, we went up the Johnson Strait. And this is a very long, arduous strait that you have to plan quite carefully because there can be sometimes opposing winds and currents. And there are very few areas to duck into for anchorages to escape it. But we went up the Johnson Strait up here to Alert Bay on the Powell Island. and right across from there is Port McNeill. And so we resupplied at Port McNeill and then went over into the Broughton Archipelago. In Alert Bay, it's a very large First Nations reserve there, and they have a totem park. The totems are never changed. They do not repaint them. They do not remount them. They are allowed to just degrade in a natural setting. Also in Alert Bay, there was the remains of a residential school. When I was there, the big debate going on was, do they want to keep that school there as a monument and a memorial and a museum, or they want to get rid of it because of the horrendous associations with it? Since we have left there, that school has been removed. And they've got some First Nations museum, the Longhouse, and interpretive sites at that location. Now, over on McNeill, we had to, Port McNeill, we went to their logging festival. And it was quite fascinating to see the various competitions. So here, these guys are out on the end of these timbers and seeing how fast they can cut through. And it's a timed factor here. Then you have individual log cutting like this. So the chat's getting ready to start. And it's a one-man deal, and this man is simply helping separate the timber as it is sawed down. We even had the women getting into it. So here is a two-woman sawing contest. And women aren't to be outdone either in the axe throwing contest. This lady was quite proficient in her throwing of the axe, as you can see. And these guys standing up had to hack through this little bit of timber to see again who would be able to split the fastest. Now remember that image I showed you of the stumps with these little holes in them. Here's the reason for those holes. They are used as springboards. They're chopped in there and the springboard is inserted, and then they can cut the tree at a higher level. Okay, so now we're going over to the Broughton proper, and we went up in this way and through because I wanted to go up this Night Inlet. It's a beautiful long inlet, and it's 75 nautical miles from the beginning up here to the end. And in these inlets, you've got to watch your timing because there are no anchorages across here. So if you get stuck up in this inlet and you want to get back before dark, you've got to make sure that you know what kind of areas you can cover. So we went through, we anchored down here and anchored in Glendale Cove, and then we went up and we wanted to look up at this Cascade Falls. We went up a little bit beyond it. But again, we had to make sure that we were able to get back to this Glendale Cove anchorage before dark. And of course, that's what we did. The other interesting thing is that there can be some very heavy wind howling down these valleys, and that can create quite a chop depending upon where the currents are. Because these are areas of ecotourism, they have high-speed boats that take people up here and back. And we were not quite swamped, but a few times we had to roll quite a bit as these boats went roaring up to take their tourists up to Cascade Falls. And of course, there are a series of waterfalls along the whole area. So here we are going into Night Cove. And waterfalls like this are all available. Including small ones that come in this way. Quite often when you have a small river coming in here, you may have sufficient shallow around it to be able to anchor. But again, you're exposed to the entire wind factors of the arm. And here's another area that had been logged. That was probably logged about 5 years ago. And it's regenerating itself. I asked the loggers the question once, do they replant? And the answer was basically not very often. In some of the places lower the BC mainland, they might replant as a PR gesture. But many of these logging areas will regenerate themselves without wheat planting specifically. Bears. This is one of the things that Knight Inlet is noted for. Black bears and grizzly. And so we were dinging along this cove and watched these little guys rushing through the rocks, including a couple of grizzlies that were wandering around doing the same thing. Now, fortunately, we were out in our dinghy. We weren't going to go trying to go ashore when these guys are in the area. Okay, so this is the leaving now. This is the upper end of the bay, and we've gone beyond Cascade Falls, and we're up here, and we're heading back. Again, these areas that have been recently lumbered. So here we are leaving that particular area now. Beautiful mountains in the background, and there are glaciers in those mountain ranges. We stopped at a place called Sargent Passage, which is at the end of Knight's Inlet. And this used to be a lumbering area. Here is the lumbering dock. So we anchored just off this dock. And the next morning, we had a visitor. And we found this guy wandering along the dock. And we were still anchored and had swung towards the dock. So our stern of our boat was probably only 15 feet away from this dock. And this guy looked over and we were wondering, uh-oh, is he thinking of going for a swim? However, he then ambled away and he didn't have any worry about him. Going up into the main area of the Broughtons, again, it's a beautiful series of islands, lots of good anchorages, you can dinghy around, and fantastic scenery. Now this is going up the Mackenzie Sound. See, another inlet goes up quite a ways. And I love the idea, especially seeing the clouds underneath the mountains over top of the clouds. And so there's some fantastic scenery that is available there. Again, you have to watch. This is a smaller passage going between islands, and you have to watch for the currents that go through. So you have to be aware of when slack water or maximum tidal factors are in play. This is one that we were anchored off of on the bay coming in here. At high tide, we would take the dinghy up and around, explore it, and then come back down. So we could do a lot of explorations with the dinghy. But again, you have to be aware of when is the tide, because once, I guess, we were trapped up there and it was low tide and we had a hard time getting out the entrance because of the lower tide factors. Now here's the, again, beautiful area of the Broughtons. Now these were the areas that we were playing around in. Here's Knight Inlet going up here. This is that Sargent Passage where we saw the black bears looking across us. There are several marinas there. They're mom and pop shop type of things, more informal. The major ones are Echo Bay and Sullivan Bay, but there are a couple of others that are located around. When I say mom and pop shops, they are, you know, usually owned by a family that they are up there just during the summer period, and then they have houses and homes back down south. They don't necessarily stay there for the whole winter. Also, the marinas are all floating areas. There are no real civilized land areas that they're there. So what people do is that they put everything on timber floats. But because they're mom and pop shops, they usually have the potluck suppers several nights a week, and they have get-togethers. So here we are at this, I believe, is which one is that? It's
Right.
okay, Harvey's Cove. And so here we are after the potluck, having a bit of a sing-song. And this is the inside of that little bit of a shelter hat. So you can borrow books. And People will often donate flags of their various yacht clubs to them as well. In addition, though, they have a heater system here so that people who are out doing their shrimping can actually cook their shrimp right here in this little shelter. So I took a stab at it. So we bought ourselves a small shrimp outfit, and we would drop it in. I'm not a very good fisherman or a shrimper. Sometimes we'd get maybe a half dozen. I think a dozen at one point was the most I ever got at one point in time. But they were quite nice, and so they made good finger food and nice meals. But as I say, I'm not a fisherman at all, unfortunately. I don't have the patience for it. But this lady had far more success, and so here she is cleaning the shrimp that they got when they were out for a day. What people will do is they'll stay in a marina or an anchorage for weeks at a time. They find a good shrimping spot, and they drop their pots in the afternoon, and they go up the next morning and pick them up at that point in time. As I said, I wasn't a very good fisherman. However, we did have one fish. This salmon actually jumped into our dinghy. We were in a place called April Cove in the Broughton, and it was spawning season. And I was looking at the number of fish that were breaking the surface, and phenomenal. I mean, we're talking 30 or 40 splashes of fish in a minute. And this went on for hours at a time in this April Cove. And the next day, when we lowered our dinghy, we saw this salmon that had jumped into the dinghy. So that's the only salmon I caught in British Columbia. So here's Judy with the salmon that she went down and picked it up. And it was a good-sized one. And so we had some guests on board. So we had a very nice salmon dinner, courtesy of the salmon that jumped into our dinghy. There were lots of dolphins. We saw dolphins, whales, and sea otters. But we enjoyed particularly this dolphin display because they were having, I guess it was, a mating season for them. And so here were these hundreds of dolphins going in a frenzy all over the place. We watched them for an hour at a time. And you can see other boats coming down to take a look at what these dolphins were doing. And it looked as if they were having a great old time. We also saw whales. Humpback whales are the more popular ones up there. We didn't have any close encounters with them, but some of those whales would be as big as our boat, and so you don't want to mess with them. And also, whale watching activities are told to stay at least 100 meters away from the whales. You don't want them interfering with them.
The only problem is the whales don't always know that.
And sometimes the whales come towards you. Well, here's a whale who's getting ready and going down for his deep dive. Then I got a chuckle out of these sea otters wandering around on their back, looking around the world, taking life easy. Again, fish farms in this beautiful area were unfortunately there. And as I said, the First Nations are very opposed to them. This little lady is by the name of Nikki. She is an ecotourism specialist. She actually lives by herself in a shack out on the off Echo Bay Marina. And here she was invited down for an afternoon to talk about the life at sea, and especially these
Stars, sea stars.
And so she had a chance to show them, and we all had a chance to touch them and see what they were like. And the next day, we went out on an eco tour with Nikki. And here she is showing us how to use a wooden dowel for starting a fire. And she got it going with a very little bit of moss, very dry, and then started the fire. And then we cooked a meal that she had picked up for us. This is one of the Indian First Nation reservations that are in the area. And there are several First Nations up there that actually conduct eco tours as well. One of our favorite spots was Pierre's Bay Lodge and Marina. And this was in Echo Bay. And he has again, mom and pop. Pierre is I guess it's Montreal. And he comes up for every winter or every summer and opens this up. It's a very good lodge. They have a pig roast and they also have prime rib roast frequently there. You do need to make reservations in advance. The time we went up there, we had to wait for the next time before that we were able to have a meal with them at their pig roast. So this is the marina. These buildings are on floats again because they don't have any area of getting onto the land. And this was a funny kind of thing. They had a dog race where the people would bring their dogs up here, and then at this word go, they would see how fast they could be attracted to come down to their owners at the far end. And there were many people who would have dogs on board. However, they spiked it with dog food along the way, so they would sidetrack the dogs from running back down to their masters at the far end. And they have all kinds of signs. I like this one about the weather forecast, depending upon the condition of this hanging rock. If the stone is wet, it's raining. If the stone's dry, not raining. If there's a shadow on the ground, it's sunny. If it's white on the top, it's snowing. If you can't see the snow, it's foggy. If the swinging stone, it's windy. If it jumps up and down, well, there's an earthquake. If the stone's gone, tornado. And so that was their weather forecasting situation there. We happened to be there on Canada Day. So we had our boat decorated overall. And what we do with it when we decorate our boat is that we have on the forestrings all our racing flags from our home yacht club in Toronto. And on the after strings, we have the various yacht clubs that we visited and also the courtesy flags of the various countries that we visited. So it makes quite a bit of bunting that we have when we dress ship overall. And so here we are at Canada Day celebration in Echo Bay. And this was part of a pig roast that we had. Here's the group of us. Again, we had to make reservations, and they are very well attended. So if you're going up in those areas, do phone ahead and or use their internet and make your reservations. Incidentally, they have no power on these islands coming from the mainland. All of their power comes from generators that they have at the marinas. But here is Pierre and one of his helpers for the pig roast. It's quite the thing when they have it and see them after cutting the pig up to divide it up. The other thing we loved were these prime rib roasts that they had as well. Again, they have these almost on a weekly basis, but you do need to make your reservations. So here's Pierre, and this is his wife, and this is a friend that helps them. So these are the mountains in the background. And these are the float homes. As I say, these are all floating on logs. They're not the plastic cans or anything of that nature. These are solid logs that these homes are built on. And I'm not sure sometimes if they are approved by the government. I think some people will build a float home and just put it in a cove and live in it during the summer hours, summertime. These green are float homes. This is an interesting vessel, an American vessel, but it's a replica of Joshua's floating boat, the Spray. So we went over and had a chat with the chap. And he tends to spend his summers up here in the Broughton Islands. There are all kinds of float homes here. And these are people, they are privately owned in many cases, and they come up for the summer for various periods of time. I often thought it'd be quite interesting to live on the float home. My wife wouldn't like it, but I'd find it of interest. And this float home has its own little breakwater, so that it's not going to be abused by the heavy winds that sometimes come in the area. This is the other side of the Echo Bay Marina. Again, all these float homes are on timber floats. Here's a chap, he sent us a note saying his was moving day, and he's actually taking and towing his float home into another bay. And here's an abandoned float home. The logs started to become saturated, going down. The guy was going to lose everything, and so it's just abandoned. I don't know what kind of pollution it's going to create when it dismembers itself. But the other problem they have on the BC coast are abandoned boats. And apparently this is a real problem for the government. How do they get rid of them? And it's an expensive proposition for the government to do so. Now we're over here now. This is Sullivan Island, or South Sullivan Marina. And it's a far more upscale kind of marina. But again, everything is on floats. And they had potluck supper. So here's Judy down here, and we're having a potluck supper in this canopy tent. And so here are the floats. These homes are owned or rented out. I think many of them are owned privately. And this is part of the marina. And here's another lovely float home, and its own little picket fence and garden almost set up. I think it'd be great to have a float home and just use your boat to go back and forth. Again, these would be all seasonal homes. Here's a guy, he even has a helicopter platform on top. So this is our leaving of the area in the Broughton Islands. Beautiful area. I frankly would love to be able to spend more time in that. We actually spent a month playing around the area, but people come up and spend the entire summer there, anchoring in only one or two places or taking out a monthly contract in one of the marinas. It's a very interesting lifestyle. Now, this is a list of some of the other contacts that you can have for marinas and eco tours and that. If any of you would like to have a copy of this list, don't hesitate to send me an email and I'll be glad to forward to you a copy of that list and any other questions you've got. I've been writing logs of all of our travels and I've got logs of many of these areas as well. So don't hesitate to contact me about that. And as I say, this is our email address, SVV for sailing vessel, Goleta4 @hotmail.com. Don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions. And if you are interested in our boat, you might look at this website, www.goletaiv.ca. The boat right now is in the northern tip of the Sea of Cortez in Mexico. And our plans are to ship it from Mexico over to Chicago, put it in the water and sail it up to Lake Huron where we have our North Channel Yacht Club. However, if I could sell the boat down in Mexico, it would save me the expense of shipping it. So for that reason, the boat is for sale. Actually, I'd really like to have it back up here again because that's our enjoyable way of life. And so this concludes our time in the Desolation Sound and Broughton Islands, a beautiful area. We would recommend take some time if you have and go up there. And you can make contact with all the various provincial parks. Just Google the names of some of the areas and it will come up with the necessary information that you want. So that I'm pleased to have a chance to make this presentation. In fact, it gives me a chance to refresh our memories about what we did and the enjoyable time we had in sailing that part of the world. So I'm available now for any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
All right, and we do have a bunch of questions. Let's start with David Eilers. Do you remember a ballpark price to bring from Corpus Christi to Bellingham? I hear $1,000 a foot, which sounded high.
No.
Well, when we did it, of course, which is when we did this, which is, I guess, 7-8 years ago now, it cost us $8,000 US to ship a 32-foot boat. But that's back then, and US dollars back then. No certainty as to what it would be now.
And we still had some expenses at both ends in terms of hauling it out and launching it. Now, we were looking at shipping from the Port of Penasco in Mexico over to Chicago, which is a slightly smaller distance. But one of the estimates that we had was $15,000 for it. That's why we're prepared to sell the boat down in Mexico if we can do so, rather than having the expense of bringing it up here. If we bring it up here, we will take it off the market because we will enjoy it up here. But it is available if anybody wants a nice 32-foot Ontario sailboat down in Mexico.
Okay, and now we have Lori Hall asking, what time of year was this, please? I think she's talking about the pictures you've been showing early in the presentation.
We were doing this in June, July, maybe August. It was midsummer, high summer, however one should phrase that.
Okay, and Jeff Davis is asking, can you please show your dinghy tow system more clearly? Couldn't see how it was rigged in the picture shown.
Can you get a picture, bring up a picture of the dinghy tow? While Aubrey looks for a picture, it's actually an Ontario company called Dinghy Tow. And there are two rigid arms on brackets at the on the transom of the boat, our boat, which clip to rigid brackets on the dinghy, and then a block and tackle system to raise the dinghy up. But it's a proprietary system. It cost, I think, on the order of 1,500 Canadian, and it was a 1.5, maybe 2-day job for us to install it, as long as you've got access to the transom of the inside of the transom of your boat. It's very user-friendly. It's literally a matter of a couple of minutes to unclip the dinghy and lower it, or to clip it on and climb out of it and raise it. That one. I don't think we've got a detailed picture showing it, but the dinghy, transom of the dinghy is against the transom of the boat, and then it's lifted up. So just the bow of the dinghy is in the water. We have not had a following sea break into it, but if one did, it would spill out over the bow.
The other thing we like is that we can leave the outboard on it and the fuel tank in it, so that we just simply lower it into the water, detach it, and away we go. So we've had that on all the way down the east and west coast of the North America, and we had it all the way from, and when we were over in Europe, all the way down through the French canals and all the way around through the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. So we're quite happy with that particular system. Right now, unfortunately, we don't have a dinghy to go with it because the dinghy deteriorated last year when we left it over the winter. So that, we got the outboard, but not the dinghy. But we still have all the equipment for the dinghy tow system.
Okay, and we have an anonymous comment saying all the fish farms in the Discovery Islands are being phased out now.
Oh, good.
Okay.
The fish farms are being phased out.
Yeah, we heard that, but there are a lot of them, and we certainly hope they do.
And we have Robert Sinkus saying, did you have to be concerned with the winds into Glendale at anchor?
We had to be concerned with them everywhere. It's always a crapshoot. You know, you hope that you've got decent conditions, and usually in the summer the winds are fairly light. That's usually no guarantee about any given day. You try and get the best shelter you can, but it's always a concern.
Well, this is also where going up and down the inlets, the wind tends to funnel up and down the inlets rather than across. And you also, when you're going up the inlets, there are not a lot of anchorages that you can depend on. So you've got to plan where you're going to go for your main anchorage and also any kind of alternatives. If you don't have any alternatives, you better wait for the best weather you can possibly get. But wind is always a factor, especially going up that Johnson Strait. That can be a long slog if you're going up against the wind in that particular location.
And if you're heading northwest, you're generally going against the wind.
And of course, the other thing too is that the wind will swing you around on your anchor, so that you've got to make sure that you have the appropriate radius for swinging, so that you don't drift onto the shoals. We had that problem once where we swung around towards the shallows, and at low tide, we were touching the bottom.
And now we have Brigitte, parent, asking, what type of anchor did you have and would you recommend it?
Yeah, we've got a claw anchor, a modification of the Bruce anchor, and we're very happy with it. We had a CQR for a number of years, but we found every time we dove on the CQR, it was just lying on the bottom on its side. Just the weight of the anchor was the thing. And for our boat, we have a 45-pound claw and a 35-pound CQR. And we found the claw being very effective. We also have over 100 feet of chain with it as well, plus another 100 or 150 feet of rope, so that we are very careful about our anchoring. We want to make sure that our anchoring system works for us. We've been happy with it so far. If we were to change, I probably would look at the rock knot. I've heard very good things about that, but we're happy with the claw.
All right. We have a comment from Chris Whitehead and Jacqueline Prokopanko saying that Pierre sold Echo Bay last summer.
Well, I hope whoever is taking it over does something approaching as good a job, because it was a really nice place to visit.
Okay, and Ted Gwynn was asking whether Judy was hiding. I guess for part of the presentation you were off the screen, Judy.
Yeah, I wasn't really hiding, but if I get in and start sticking comments in, it really messes up the timing.
All right, and we have somebody asking, can you clarify the email address in the chat? It provides a Gmail address, and your slide gave a Hotmail address. If you look at the chat and the email address posted there, is it correct?
I don't know where it is on the chat. We do have a Gmail, but we rarely use it. The one that will get us most reliably is svvaleda@hotmail.com.
Yeah,
okay.
Sailing vessel Valeda4@hotmail.com.
All right, so I'm going to type that in the chat window again for everybody. So here it's updated now.
Thank you.
So same thing, except it's at hotmail.com, everybody. All right, and let's see, we have a few more here. Is there First Nation restrictions for mooring in Glendale Cove?
We're not aware of any restrictions. We tended to anchor. We only went alongside in marinas
or provincial parks,
or sometimes in parks. We didn't go alongside unless we were sure it was an appropriate place to do so. But we are comfortable being out at anchor. Then we'd dinghy in if we were going in. If Glendale Cove, I'm trying to remember exactly where Glendale Cove is. This was a few years ago that we were there. Is that up in Knight Inlet? If that's the one in Knight Inlet. That's the one in Knight Inlet. When we were there, there was a lodge. And we did not go ashore. We dinghied, but we did not go ashore. I believe at that time it was permissible to go ashore. But again, it was part of the lodge and you have to ask if it was okay. All I can say is that we didn't, just because we didn't.
Okay, Sultan Smith shared a link with us, which is showing a website that has a system for dinghy tow. So I've shared the link in the chat window for anybody who wants to take a look at it, to click on it, and you'll see right on that page, there's a picture of the dinghy tow.
Oh, good. Thank you, because I'm not quite sure where the chat window is. So,
Yeah.
All right. You'll find it if you click on the chat button on your Zoom window. So
not
let's see.
seeing
We
it, but
have
that's fine. If you found that, that's great. This is our second dinghy tow after I think about 12 years of constant use. We did have one of the brackets fracture due to metal fatigue in very heavy conditions as we were crossing the strait between Newfoundland and Nova Scotia.
San Miguel.
Between Newfoundland and Nova Scotia in the waves that were after the tail end of a hurricane went through there. And we had one of the brackets fracture. So we didn't feel that after that many years, I think it was actually more like 15 years that we had it on, we didn't think it really owed us anything. We just bought a new unit and put it on. So we've been very pleased with the dinghy tow.
Okay, and on the same topic, Shelley Harris is asking, does the dinghy impede the integrity of sailing?
No, I think it increases our waterline length and improves our speed. I'm not sure that that's true. I just believe it. But where, in our experience, times that we have just towed a dinghy on a line, it has slowed us by about a knot. Having it on the dinghy tow, if it slows us, does it negligibly, because you're not getting a lot of drag.
It also helps to break any overtaking waves. So if an overtaking wave comes, it'll break into the dinghy instead.
Yeah.
Veleta is a very good sea boat. We've never been pooped and we've never buried our bow. It rides over the waves quite nicely. And as I say, the dinghy tow can sometimes help to break the waves.
Yeah. Now, we didn't have a dinghy on a dinghy tow during our Atlantic crossings. That was just asking for trouble. But all of our coastal sailing, and coastal can mean up to, I think our longest coastal in quotation marks passage was 8-9 days going direct from Grenada to Jamaica. And we had the dinghy on the dinghy tow for that passage.
Okay, we can squeeze in one more before we have to wrap. Although there's a whole bunch of questions that are left unanswered. So I do recommend anybody who wants to follow up to email Aubrey and Judy at the address shown in the chat box. And hopefully you'll get your answers at that point. So we'll squeeze in one more from Robert Sinkus saying, Glendale has a resort with no public moorage available. I understand going ashore is dangerous due to bears.
Yes, that's where we saw the grizzly bears and some black bears. I know that they run bear tourism excursions from Glendale, or I believe that they do. That's one of the reasons we didn't go. I mean, we didn't go ashore because it was a private facility and because there were bears. We just looked at them from the dinghy.
Yeah. Incidentally, I'm going to be making another presentation tomorrow and the next day. I think tomorrow is San Juan and the Gulf Islands. And then I'm making another presentation on our trip further north, where we went up to Haida Gwaii and then came down the west coast of Vancouver Island. So those are going to be the next two presentations that I'll be doing later this week.
All right, well, that was Living the Dream, Desolation Sound and the Broughton Islands by Aubrey and Judy Millard. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. It was quite captivating. And everybody who joined us, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here. Please check out all the features at the VIBS, and I hope you have a wonderful day at the boat show.
Oh yeah, the season starts.